I don't care about your feelings. Like, just be perfectly clear, I care nothing about your feelings.
That's why Dave Rubin left the company. And now all of a sudden he's getting funded by the Koch brothers, and all of a sudden his opinions are very different.
I like talking about ideas, not about people.
These are facts, and facts don't care about your feelings.
And I have to say that my brain is still in recovery mode from taking in so many high-level important ideas.
So here's what you should have done if you were a Nazi and you wanted to win the war. You should have enslaved the Jews and the Gypsies and had them work.
I'll be totally honest with you, sometimes he says things that fly by me as well. Ideas.
You're on this carnivore diet now.
I've been on a pure carnivore diet for about 2 months. Well, I have a negative story.
Okay.
And we had some apple cider that had sulfites in it, and that was really not good. Like, I was done for a month. That was the first time I talked to Sam Harris.
You were done for a month.
Because
apple cider. Like, what was it doing?
Sulfites in it.
What was it doing to you?
It produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom.
From fucking cider.
Well, I didn't sleep that month. I didn't sleep for 25 days. I didn't sleep at all. I didn't sleep at all for 25 days.
How is that possible?
I'll tell you how it's possible. You lay in bed, frozen in something approximating terror for 8 hours, and then you get up.
Ideas.
Right, the glorious, everlasting Third Reich.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
No, I know. Well, but wait, to be fair, but to be fair, you're actually being kind of rude.
I've been noticing a troubling pattern recently, and I'm sure you have too. After the conservative right wing spent many decades as the political movement of censorship, hysteria, evangelicalism, and mass panic over moral values, in recent times there's been a swing towards claims of rationality, scientific reasoning, and intellectualism. And I find this really troubling because it's us on the left who really value discourse, rational discussion, theory, and civil debate. So I've decided I'm going to take down these pretenders, these false brain giants, these intellectual paper tigers, these frauds. I'm going to destroy them in the realm of facts and logic. How did that look? That was good? Yeah? That looked good? Yeah. This group started calling themselves the Intellectual Dark Web, clearly a name that conjures up images of a renegade group on the run from politically correct mind police who want to censor them by being nice to trans people. Or at least it conjures up that image if you aren't already familiar with the dark web being a term for the illegal parts of the internet where people go to buy biochemical weapons and child porn. But this is the intellectual dark web. I'm not afraid to take this gang on. I'm not afraid of anything. Except those tiny ships in bottles. How do they get them in there? Are there tiny people working on the tiny ship? Through a highly scientific process that I can't reveal at this time, but I promise is very smart, I've determined first we're going to talk about Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is an American conservative who's built his brand on the cornerstones of facts, reason, logic, and civility. Ben's powerful big ideas, like a mighty castle of debate, are cold, carefully designed, and impossible to defeat. But also, like a castle, are about 400 years out of date, have terrible plumbing, and are the home to the ghosts of creepy old white men. And the worst thing about Ben is that, frankly, he isn't really a very good debater.
Hi, I'm Sarah Zed. Besides making video essays where I talk about specific cultural phenomena, I'm also a competitive university debater. For the last 2 years, I was the president of my university's debate society, and I'm now in an administrative role in my country's national university debate organization. During formal tournaments, I've both judged and participated in a lot of debates, and I've even won a good number. My portion of this video is a small sneak peek of an upcoming video where I talk about the subject at length. I'm here on Curio's channel because as a debater, I see a lot of comments from people claiming Ben Shapiro is not only a good debater, but the greatest debater of all time. As someone with a formal debate background who's trained a lot of beginner debaters, his speeches to me are more reminiscent of a beginner who's imitating the aesthetic of a good debater than they are of logically consistent speeches. I don't think the guy's an idiot either. He's at least been academically successful, and I'm sure through attending law school he would have had some degree of formal training in logical reasoning. My assumption is, like many other prominent right-wing figures, he knows his arguments aren't logically consistent and simply doesn't care. This is evidenced by the fact that when you search up Ben Shapiro debate on YouTube, the top results, with a couple exceptions, are almost exclusively A, him destroying random university students and not other journalists with a similar degree of prestige, and B, not formal moderated debates where both parties are given an equal amount of time to speak and rebut one another, but rather digressions from Shapiro's speeches in which he always has the last word and can speak over the others at any time. This is effectively the debate equivalent of an average quality sprinter exclusively challenging children to races where he gets extra time and then going, "Look, but I won most of these matches, I must be the greatest player of all time." This is further evidenced by the fact that when Shapiro does engage in debates with actual journalists and people his own age, he tends not to fare very well. Take Shapiro's interview with journalist Andrew Neil pertaining to his new book. Neil pointed out numerous examples of Ben Shapiro contributing to and benefiting from a culture of anger and personal attacks, despite the fact that Shapiro's book blamed the left for public discourse becoming less civil. As the interview continued and Neil kept bringing up more and more quotes, many of which Shapiro still stood by, Ben Shapiro quickly became more and more flustered. He then accused Neil, a hardline conservative, of being a leftist before resulting to personal insults and cutting the interview short. Shapiro himself later acknowledged that he wasn't properly prepared for Neil's comments, which led him to lose the debate, but followed up that acknowledgement with an article claiming that the majority of these comments were either taken out of context or were completely true and were just things liberals didn't like. This is interesting to me because Shapiro is clearly capable of understanding that sounding the most eloquent and rhetorically correct in a debate does not actually mean that your position is the correct one. Losing in a debate does not mean that you're wrong. The fact that he's linked to a website effectively saying, "Listen, I lost a debate on this matter because I wasn't ready, but I'm still right about it," is evidence enough. What's interesting is that he does not hold debates where he supposedly wins to that standard. Owning an 18-year-old who didn't go to law school and wasn't trained in argument while you have the mic and most of the speaking time and only allow that 18-year-old to contribute to the conversation when it personally benefits you is extremely easy. You can do it with almost any topic. The way Shapiro primarily engages with ill-prepared students, calls these speeches debates, and then revels in the success he gets from these videos being labeled as Shapiro destroys college snowflakes while embarrassing himself in conversations with actual adults is frustrating in and of itself, but it's notable that even with this massive advantage of him having most of the speaking time and nobody being able to call him out on his untrue statements right then and there, he's still clearly not making logically consistent arguments.
In many ways, Ben's mighty castle of ideas is a trap as much as it is a defense. He's entombed within his own battlements, left to roam the empty, dark halls of his own bullshit. It's like the fall of the House of Usher. See, I thought Ben would appreciate that literary reference, seeing as he's also a published fiction author. His novel True Allegiance is about a big, strong bear of a man, Ben's words, not mine, veteran trooper who just wants to keep America free, a liberal president who's an absolute buffoon who isn't Obama, it's not Obama, I promise, definitely not Obama, and a black gangster and community leader who tricks a white cop into shooting a black kid so he can exploit the political reaction. Because you know how much white cops hate shooting black kids. That's why you gotta trick them. You know, just remember, if you see it on the news that a white cop shot a black kid, it could be a trick. True Allegiance has dozens upon dozens of terrible reviews from disappointed or maybe even angry Shapiro fans who, even though they agree with his politics 100%, find it to be tepid at best. Ben's novel isn't just terrible. It is terrible, but it's also a fascinating look inside his mind and inside his political positions in a way that you don't regularly get with his normal brand of cold hard facts. See, when Ben isn't given his assumed guise of objectivity, his license to tell you that whatever he says is true, and the ability to direct your attention wherever he wants, as he does in his many purely political non-fiction books, he kind of falls apart. When Ben has to write feelings as well as facts, it's really easy to tell what total horseshit he's trying to sell you. Next, let's look at Stefan Molyneux. Wait a second, Stefan Molyneux? No, that guy's a disgusting racist. He believes that black people have brains smaller than white people. Like an honest-to-God phrenologist. He's like the shittiest possible outcome of Victorian time travel. I don't know how this guy got on the list. I'm so sorry, guys. Fuck! Who else is there in the IDW? There's Sam Harris and the Chuckle Brothers. Sam's an Islamophobe. Wait, sorry, okay, I know Sam hates being taken out of context. Sam's a boring Islamophobe. There's Jordan Peterson, of course, the scientist who disregards science in favor of views he prefers. Almost like his feelings don't care about the fact. Despite widespread consensus in the scientific community about the validity of self-identification relating to gender, Jordan Peterson was still able to make his bread and butter on the brand of the lone, rebel academic, willing to cast scientific doubt on the trans ideology.
If the dial of ideas was turned to low for the last few years, it's quickly moving into the hot position.
Let's talk about Dave Rubin, the Grima Wormtongue of the IDW, who welcomes these giants into his intellectual arena, the marketplace of ideas, the Rubin Report, and then doesn't actually debate or challenge anyone's ideas. His job is just to pleasantly smile and nod while his guests say atrocious lies, and the Koch family pay him very well for that. Oh shit, did I say the Koch family? I'm so sorry, Dave. I meant small independent contributions to the show from the billionaire Koch family. Dave has pleasantly smiled and nodded along at Ben Shapiro while he was calling him a sinner for being gay, Tommy Sotomayor, friend of KKK leader David Duke, who reacted like this when he found out Rubin was married to a man.
Dave Rubin is gay? No! He got a husband? I shook his hand! Ah!
And Stefan Molyneux. Wait, Stefan, no!
Now, actually, there's a new center developing, and I think both of us are sort of in that, not in the exact same political part, but to me, that's irrelevant.
I mean, if we took the brain of a 25-year-old black man and the brain of a 25-year-old white man, what is it that they're doing that...
different sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a new center developing, and I think both of us are sort of in that.
Different sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like talking about ideas.
It's hard to tell what connects these people, considering they all have different claims to the identity of intellectual. Ben Shapiro is a trained lawyer and debater, Jordan Peterson is an academic, Dave Rubin. Also, within the conservative fish tank of political thought, they all have fairly varied political beliefs. Here's one though. Transphobia seems to be something that unites the dark web. Oh shit, sorry, the intellectual dark. They all deny to some degree the existence or legitimacy of transgender people, claiming, as any rational, scientific and curious mind would, that the science is still out on sex and gender, and that liberal social justice has gone too far in letting people just identify as whatever gender they want. As any rational, scientific and curious mind would, they're worried that people just attack them and call them bigots when they express simple concerns about the children. Won't somebody think of the children? And I'm sure that as any rational, scientific and curious mind would, they've researched the history of trans people and found that the person who coined the term transsexual, the first person to research trans people as a phenomenon, said the best way to find out if someone's trans is to fucking ask them. We are, after all, dealing with intellectuals here. The problem is, these big special smart boys don't believe that you could just go along with what's politically correct to be nice to people and, take the time on your own time to educate yourself on the issues. It would be all too easy to just figure out the facts and logic on your own time, but you have to remember facts don't care about your feelings. So it's only morally right and rational for Dr. Peterson to continue on his quest for truth, even if it does end up with his colleagues calling him a pathetic loser, and people pouring glue in his office door lock because he won't shut up about his fucking bullshit. I mean, Galileo was arrested by the Pope for the sake of science. Of course, Galileo wasn't defending his right to call people by the wrong pronouns. So, I'm sure there are people in Jürgen Pergenmann's life who would happily explain things to him if he was interested, and if he was approaching the issue with scientific curiosity. But that's just the thing. He and Ben Shapiro and the rest of the intellectual dark web aren't interested in uncovering new truth. They want to defend facts they already learned. We can easily imagine people who already learned that the world is one way and now are having a hard time adjusting to it being different. As long as we imagine those people as 5-year-olds and not grown adults and respected public intellectuals. And that brings me to an interesting place, right? Because that's another thing these guys will have in common. They're all actually anti-intellectuals, trying to claim the opposite. They're all using the aesthetics of intellectualism. They rely on gotcha arguments, rehearsed talking points, and cherry-picked facts and figures to create the illusion of winning arguments, rather than actually logically defeating their opponents. As famous Austrian communist Albert Einstein once said, facts and figures are to a fool as inflation is to a pufferfish. I lied, he never actually said that. It's just true on its own merits, and that's the aesthetics of intellectualism, baby! Alright, fellow big brains, let's dive in and take a look at the aesthetics of intellectualism. How con men convince you they're smart and rational, why they do it, and who's really behind these bandages. Spoiler, it's a bunch of white guys.
Now let's see who's really behind these bandages.
When I was a tiny baby in engineering school on an intercollegiate maths course, one of the first things we were taught were Fermi calculations. If you've ever played a good old-fashioned game of how many jelly beans in the jar, or similar pseudo-mathematical guesswork, you've done a Fermi calculation. A Fermi calculation is a fast and sloppy estimate trying to make the best possible educated guess using known quantities. The example we were given to calculate in the class was something that, at least at the time, wasn't available at all through Google. How many train drivers are employed by Transport for London? I got the closest answer in the class, out by only about 5 people from the actual number. And obviously I'm telling you that to demonstrate and brag that I have a big strong muscle brain made of beef and gains, but also I want to demonstrate what a crapshoot Fermi calculations are. It was a few years ago now, but to the best of my recollection I made my estimate by saying this. On average, there is a train at a platform about every 4 minutes on any given line, and on any given line it takes about 4 hours to go all the way round, end to end and back again. So there must be 60 drivers per line. Plus some small adjustments for reserve drivers and shift changes and so on. Now, I am genuinely quite vain about my mathematical ability, so I wouldn't be telling you this appallingly awful example with these dogshit assumptions that I made if I weren't trying to make a point. That a really, really bad Fermi calculation can get a really accurate estimate, and for that matter, a very good and logical Fermi calculation can get a terrible estimate. I really learned 2 things in that class that day. One, a Fermi calculation is a fantastic way to bullshit people, and 2, Fermi calculations are an incredible way to spot a bullshitter. What I am trying to say is that when Ben Shapiro takes the current rate of suicidality for trans people and says that if children are allowed to determine their own gender, then that suicide rate will apply to all of them, that's obvious bullshit. Obviously you can debunk this by saying, no Ben, trans people are suicidal because of transphobes like you, not because of statistics. Or you can point out that the mental health of a population that encourages their children to express their gender independently of stereotypes or outdated expectations is on the whole going to be way better. But what I think is really interesting is that Ben is so obviously wrong if you're paying attention. At least to someone like me who's seen enough Fermi calculations to know, someone like Ben who's just pulling numbers out of their ass seems incredibly wrong. But to everyone else, he seems right. And not just right, he seems smart. And that's the aesthetics of intellectualism. Or at least it's one of them. Another key aesthetic is civility. The ability to stay calm and not get worked up is perceived as crucial to being the rational Dr. Smartboy brain mind. And frankly, I find that offensive. Yes, I am offended at the notion of being expected not to be offended. Welcome to Snowflake City, population me. When Ben Shapiro or whatever other glib, smirking chud is debating the basic existence or humanity of a minority group, I think it's pretty fair for the people from that group to get kind of worked up, and the tendency for moderates, centrists, and liberals to side with the party that can keep their emotions in check, to me, betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. Ben's feelings are disgust, discomfort, denial, and cognitive dissonance. The feelings of someone, say, who needs access to an abortion are terror and panic and existential dread at the possibility that Shapiro's proliferation in the media are going to affect public opinion or worse, governmental policy. And honestly,
facts don't care about your feelings.
As a response to that, makes me need to take some deep breaths and sit down with a cup of tea.
Yeah. There? Nah. Yeah.
Need to finish the video.
Another key aesthetic is confidence, or I could say unbearable smugness, but for now I'll say confidence. Speaking with authority and certainty on your topic of interest is key to being seen as smart. And that's actually how a whole industry of YouTube thinky men talking, making video essays is propped up. Enumerating the aesthetics of intellectualism isn't all that useful. I'm hoping that you can start to notice some of them for yourselves, and when you do, I hope that you'll notice a certain pattern. That every element has to be presented with a certain masculine streak to it. Throwing around fast figures is not coincidentally related to the overrepresentation of men in STEM fields. Civility is tied back to the age-old trope that women are ruled by their emotions rather than reason and logic. And confidence, well, confidence is based largely on trust, and hot take here, society does train us to trust the things that men say confidently rather than assess for ourselves the validity of their statements. As Carlos Van Buren once said, you can put anything between a pair of quotation marks and gullible sheep will nod along as if Carlos Van Buren is a real person that I didn't just make up. But I'm still curious, why is transphobia the uniting factor between these powerful minds? Is it because there's something unique about this topic, like a red flag to a bull that just causes all the jars of bullshit sauce in their skulls to open? Do they know something we don't about the scientific method that makes it just divert around this one specific topic? Or is it that all the oppression in society is based off the oppression of women by men, like the world's most bigoted house of cards, and if gender is constructed and malleable, then it'll all come crashing down around them, and that's why soulless pill salesmen like Jordan and Ben have to try so hard to stop society from accepting trans people? Nah, it couldn't possibly be that.
When you advocate for transgenderism, meaning when you do that politically, what you're doing is you're saying that there's no real gender roles, right? And if there's no traditional gender roles, then there can't be any traditional relationships. If there's no traditional relationships, then there can't be a traditional marriage. If there's not a traditional marriage, then there can't be a traditional family unit. If there's not a traditional family unit, then everybody in our nation is rendered dependent on the government.
Oh. So the aesthetics of intellectualism is a system people use to reinforce oppression, that prizes certain traits above others, and sees people who are perceived as lacking in those traits as inherently worth less, as inherently lower down the hierarchy. I feel like there's a name for that. I feel...
Aesthetics of intellectualism?
No, I'm your pizza delivery guy. Here's your pizza.
Oh,
I've been talking about these guys as scammers, and now it's time to look at the people they're scamming. It's important to consider the ways in which someone is drawn in by the aesthetics of intellectualism. It's been said and said again and said to death that Jordan Peterson appeals to people who are alienated from themselves and from others, but I don't think we talk enough about what alienation means in terms of perspective and in terms of needs. These are going to be people who don't necessarily have a solid basis for economic, social, and political theory, but they understand that there's a big other they don't understand. They may or may not be short on time, and they don't have a good starting point for how to educate themselves. And that's where we encounter the only book you'll ever need. The only book you'll ever need is at the front of the bookshop in the bestsellers section, or on the front page of Audible. And it was written by almost invariably a white man, who is in one of the academic fields that gives him free rein to claim he understands all of human behavior. History, psychology, neurology, economics, anthropology. It's the job here of the aesthetics of intellectualism to convince the audience that the author has every answer they need, is infallible, and is the best value choice. The constraint on the reader's time, the presentation of books as products, and the fact that, frankly, reading is hard work, means that under capitalism, readers feel a need to purchase the highest value book. The one that will help them the most in the shortest amount of time and at the lowest amount of effort. That's why these books are increasingly organized as lists, to sell the idea of their contents as bite-sized, easily digestible information the reader can quickly use to reshape their entire life. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, or possibly the most straightforward conceivable version of this title, 12 Rules for Life. If you're looking to buy a book that will help you as much as possible, as fast as possible, the odds that you'll buy something on history, or theory, or just something you're interested in go down dramatically. Now you're looking to buy a book as if you'll never read another, or at least as if you'll never need to read another. This book should change your life so much that the next time you buy a book, it'll be a leisure purchase. And therefore it's only natural that the books marketing themselves as the only book you'll ever need will win out in that competition. The problem is, as has been observed many times before, Jordan Peterson's self-help comes with an automatic passage into his conservative Christian beliefs. This isn't simply a Trojan horse, this is a feature of the only book you'll ever need. And it's political philosophy as self-help. So people like Peterson are going to teach you to ascend, to do better, and to be better, and the political implication of this is that you're going to be superior to everyone else. Dr. Cider Crisis just wants to help you and everyone be better by restoring the natural order of men over women. And the people who disagree, they just want to censor him, and you, and everyone, because they're weak. Because they're not living by the 12 rules and eating steak 3 times a day. They're weak, and that's why they must be destroyed, but they're also strong in this way that they control everything and want to censor everyone. And we have all the answers, and we're superior, but also there's an imminent threat, and that's why we have to fight them. And I know what this is. This is fascism. Fascism? Fascism! It was you all along!
Ideas.
We don't want to fall back to Earth, do we? Mind the gap, Alan. Mind the gap, Alan. Mind the gap, Alan.
I can't possibly make it.
What's the matter, Alan? What's the matter, Alan? Don't tell me you're afraid.
I'm not afraid.
A brave astronaut like you. Afraid.
I am not afraid.
Insert ideas to continue. Insert ideas to continue. Insert ideas to continue.
In a sense, Jordan Peterson is in the intellectual tradition of many famous thinkers. Joseph Campbell, Nietzsche, even Aristotle. These people all use their talents to create works that, read in isolation, opened the door to tremendous inhumanity. All these people didn't contribute nothing. Their works weren't useless. I'm just trying to say they all strove for one unifying theory. The only book you'll ever need. And here's the thing, a lot of edgy young guys who want to show off that they've read some philosophy are clockable from a mile away by the fact that they've only read Nietzsche. I know if you're one of these guys, you really don't want to hear this, and I know this because I used to be one of you, but you're kind of a type. And if you come into a political or philosophical discussion and all you've got is Nietzsche, and you come at people and they can tell all you've got is Nietzsche, I guarantee they're going to be rolling their eyes and waiting for you to leave. I had a friend once who took serious umbrage with the idea that his feminist girlfriend might have problems with his behavior. After all, he'd say, I'm not one of these big buff guys. He was talking, of course, about chads. I can't be a misogynist. I'm not a chad. I think we should talk about post-masculine identity. Post-masculine not in the sense that masculinity is over, but in the sense that it has occurred and then been recognized and studied, and feminist ideas are out there now in the public consciousness. Post-masculine identity must include forms of masculinity where men don't want to confront their own toxic behavior, but instead draw a false equivalency between the stereotype of the Chad and the behavior deemed toxic. Pop Culture Detective has an excellent video on this called The Adorkable Misogyny of the Big Bang Theory. Toxic masculinity has been called out, and a lot of people have figured out that they need to hide it. And one of the safest bets for doing that is to swap out the traditional aesthetics for new ones. Toxic masculinity, like fascism, wears a new face daily. Instead of big muscle time, it's big brain time. Instead of physical conquests, these men want to have high-level, important ideas. Out with the big dicks, in with the big IQ points. I know it sounds a lot like I'm saying, at least a bit, that toxic masculinity and fascism are one and the same. This essay will have a sequel. I think it's worth saying directly. We hold our beliefs based on feelings, and we use whatever facts and logic we can after the fact to justify what we believe. The job of a skeptic, an intellectual even, is to challenge those feelings and challenge what they believe and see if the logic actually supports them. When someone like Ben Shapiro claims that he has only facts and they have only feelings, he's scamming you. Plain and simple. Because measuring facts and scientific data against one another can only change someone's mind if the feelings are there too. It's just that the science also agrees with the legitimacy of trans people and the existence of non-binary genders. Ben, read a single fucking study one time. God! The fact is, and remember, this fact careth not for thine feely wheelies, if you could only be fact and no feelings, no one would like you because you'd be so boring! 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 No one will like you! Boring! And the other, maybe less important fact is, Ben and his ilk don't care much for facts at all. They aren't rationalists, they aren't empiricists, and they certainly aren't scientists. The scientists aren't the people who would look at the sky and say, it's blue, that's all I need to know. They also aren't the person who would say, well, it's red sometimes, so fuck you. Scientists look at the sky and say, the sky turns red in my part of the world once a day at this time. Why is that? These guys use the aesthetics of intellectualism, not incidentally because they're intellectuals, but because they want to manipulate your feelings. They want to make you feel like they care about facts, about reason, about science, but they don't. And what's really painful to me is their idea of what science is for is defending the way they think the world should be, and that's just not right. Science is for deepening our understanding of the world around us, and in doing so, enriching the beauty of it all.
Richard Feynman, theoretical physicist and co-creator of the atomic bomb, had a story he liked to tell about an artist friend of his who thought that scientists made flowers boring, dull things by taking them apart.
Quite as refined as aesthetically as he is, that I can appreciate the beauty of the flower. At the same time, I see much more about the flower than he sees. I could imagine the cells in there, the complicated actions inside, which also have a beauty. I mean, it's not just beauty at this dimension of 1 centimeter, there's also beauty at a smaller dimensions. The inner structure, also the processes, the fact that the colors and the flower evolved in order to attract insects to pollinate it is interesting. It means that insects can see the color. It adds a question. Does this aesthetic sense also exist in the lower forms? Why is it aesthetic? All kinds of interesting questions which the science knowledge only adds to the excitement, the mystery, and the awe of a flower. It only adds. I don't understand how it subtracts.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I'd like to thank Baphometrics for making fantastic music for this channel, as well as everyone who proofread this essay and gave me feedback. Also Alice, who gave me the analogy about the colour of the sky, and you, the viewer, for watching all the way to the end. There is a longer version of this essay available on my Patreon for $2 plus supporters. When I reach $600 a month, I will publish the long versions of this essay and my previous one, so if you don't have the money to support the channel yourself, consider sharing this video around. This month I'd like to get you to check out Advoti and Kay and Skittles. Kay and Skittles makes very good lefty political content, including a really fun look at the most entertaining political group in UK politics, the Cuck Party. Advoti makes good essays about media, some of which are really excellent, and some of which are treason. I'd like to say a massive thanks to all my supporters on Patreon, who make it possible for me to pay rent and eat and make these videos. So this is all your fault. Thank you. Bye for now.